Good evening. After a two-day manhunt, 2 sleepless nights, law enforcement have apprehended Vance Bolter. That's 48 hours that law enforcement involved in a complex and dangerous man.
Tim Walz. I don't know who thought he was a good idea. He was like a second iteration of Tim Kaine, but even worse.
Clashes like this don't come around often, even in today's tense political climate. Lindi Li, Tim Walz's challenger, is a powerhouse in her own right. Picture the contrast. Walz has long relied on his steady, cautious persona to connect with voters, but now he's standing center stage under the bright lights of live television, and the one person holding him back from coasting through? Lindi Li, armed with razor-sharp wit and biting sarcasm, she knows exactly how to spotlight flaws and call out hypocrisy.
Who could possibly think it would be a good idea to lie about being in Tiananmen Square when you were in Nebraska? I mean, come on, it's just so beyond the pale. And now he's thinking about running for president? Didn't he get the memo that the American people do not want a second coming of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? And Kamala is in California considering a run for governor. We do not want any more DEI woke, any of that. We just don't. We're done with the woke and trans.
You might be asking yourself why any of this really matters. The truth is simple. It's almost impossible to turn away when a carefully built political image, crafted and polished over years, suddenly starts to crumble before everyone's eyes.
Out of bounds.
And how soon was it after the election? Like
a week or two. It wasn't at that point. I was just asking questions. Like, it wasn't even. I was like, what happened to the $2.5 billion we raised? Why did we spend it on Beyonce? Why did we spend 2.5? Why did we spend millions of dollars on Oprah? Like legitimate questions that needed to be answered. But the amount of hate I got for that was just overwhelming. And the final straw, the moment that I knew that I needed to leave, was actually around.
And then the biggest tell of the evening was when he told the moderators, well, I thought the rules stipulated, or something to the effect of the rules were saying that you weren't going to fact check. And you talked about own goals. That was an own goal. That said everything.
But
so he was tapped on her back and no one was going to push back.
Are you frustrated then that Walz didn't make the argument that you're making to me right now?
I think he did a really good job tonight, and we had a lot.
Maybe you've assumed twists this dramatic only happen on the big screen, but here's the surprise. You don't need a ticket or even popcorn to watch this play out. And while we're here, don't forget to tap that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next.
These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. I use this line on this, just mind your own business. On this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us.
He was trafficking in lies and conspiracies. He said that he never supported a national abortion ban. We have in writing a screenshot from his website wherein he supported a national abortion.
I can honestly say your support is what keeps me motivated, and it also guarantees you won't miss the next wild turn in this story. If this election were a TV series, it would already rank as a must-watch thriller. So let's jump straight into the core of the chaos, Lindi Li's unyielding takedown of Tim Walz. And no matter what he tried, nothing seemed to change the outcome.
Basically, I mean, I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm not beholden to anyone. That's why I'm here telling the truth. I'm not here to gaslight anybody. This is just the truth.
What is the truth?
The truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Like a political thriller that is streamed live, Lindi really gave him what he wanted, which is what I mean when I say that she didn't hold back.
Going into that, I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off? She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, like, how are you feeling? He's like, we're going to win Iowa.
And it struck me, this image Walz had carefully worn, the mask of a humble, approachable leader, was torn apart piece by piece by Lindi's sharp exposure of his contradictions.
I want to take you back to the very first answer that he gave. Let's just remind ourselves, he sort of stumbled through, right now the crisis in the Middle East is, front and center of the global news agenda. And we would expect maybe that someone who was running to be the vice president would have more confidence. Let's remind ourselves of what happened.
October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in.
It was like being at a magician's show and one of the hats suddenly turning out to be a rabbit.
What do you think happened when he gave that answer, Lindy?
Well, as I mentioned before, J.D. Vance went to Yale Law School. He's seasoned, and I said this in the previous interview. This is what he does. He's slick and he's sharp, but Walz is a fundamentally good guy. And our focus group of battleground voters, mind you, understand that. They perceive that this is a down-to-earth guy, salt-to-the-earth guy who wants the best for the American people versus Vance, who is backed by Peter Thiel and was a venture capitalist and is
All that was present was complete incredulity. Now let's look at how this all happened.
What's your take?
My take is the most neglected part of home ownership is the gutters. It's personal for me.
This is Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz making an appearance on the popular TikTok show Subway Takes.
Had problems with gutters before. You get your basement wet, you get ice dams, cause a lot of problems.
How often do you like looking at gutters?
I look quite often, surprisingly, because
Like
I kind
you're
of judge it.
inspecting.
I try not to be judgmental on people, but when I see a well-tended gutter,
Walz built his brand on the image of a regular, trustworthy neighbor, the kind of person who seemed down to earth in both words and wardrobe. But Lindy wasn't satisfied with surface impressions. Like an investigator dissecting a case, she cut straight through his talking points, uncovering the contradictions he'd rather keep hidden. Take his stance on abortion, for example. For years, Walz insisted he opposed a nationwide ban, repeating over and over that he stood with women's rights. Then Lindy brought receipts, an old screenshot from his own website where he openly defended the ban. The impact was brutal, like a punch you never see coming. And that was only the beginning. Walz, like many politicians, had his share of questionable stories. One of the most infamous was his bold claim of joining the protests at Tiananmen Square, positioning himself as a defender of freedom. Yet Lindy laid out evidence showing he wasn't anywhere near China. He was safe in Nebraska. The fallout was enormous. Viewers were left wondering how anyone could pretend to play such a heroic role in one of history's most sensitive moments. But Lindy didn't stop there. She dug into his record as a state leader, especially his handling of public funds. Walz often bragged about responsible budgeting, yet Lindy highlighted suspicious allocations in the roughly $2.5 billion raised during his administration. Why, she asked, were millions of taxpayer dollars spent on celebrity appearances by the likes of Oprah and Beyonce? To the public, it looked less like governance and more like indulgence. The problems didn't end with finances. Walz's Law and Order record revealed another crack in his carefully polished image. Attempting to please both conservatives demanding tough policies and progressives calling for reform, he ended up pleasing no one. Lindy compared his approach to trying to skate uphill, awkward, confusing, and doomed to fail. Walz may like to frame himself as pragmatic, but Lindy showed that his style leaned more toward uncertainty than balance. Closing venues, reopening them, then locking them down again, his leadership seemed less like steady guidance and more like rolling dice with the public's future. Walz's delivery was as shaky as a toddler learning to walk, no matter how confidently he tried to frame his words. Another heavy hit came when Lindy confronted his use of religion as a tool for moral authority. For years, Walz leaned into the image of a man guided by faith and compassion, presenting himself as a figure the public could trust without question. But Lindy wasn't about to let that slide. She pressed him on whether his so-called empathy went beyond polished speeches, reminding the audience that actions speak louder than pious declarations. In doing so, she recast him as a performer of faith-driven politics rather than a genuine believer, another crack in his carefully maintained facade. Her argument carried weight because when a politician's policies contradict their preached values, charm alone can't hold the story together. Each misstep on stage wasn't just an error. It felt like a collapse of the entire image he'd worked so hard to build. Lindy didn't just snap a picture of his flaws, she unveiled a mural of deception, stripping away the carefully stitched mask he wore. She also turned attention toward his political ties. What once looked like trusted alliances and long-term coalitions now appeared more like power plays in a chess match, where influence was traded and credibility put at risk. Under her spotlight, those partnerships lost their warmth and looked more like bargains struck in smoky backrooms. Adding to the drama, Lindi contrasted his words about stability and progress with the reality of his record, exposing the widening gap between rhetoric and results. What emerged was a web of contradictions that mirrored the messy nature of politics itself. By the end, Lindi's takedown was no ordinary critique. It pulled back the curtain on the version of Tim Walz many suspected but had never fully seen. This wasn't just about one leader's reputation. It was about demanding honesty in a field dominated by masks and slogans. With his brand shaken and his trustworthiness in question, audiences everywhere were left reevaluating what they expect from those in power. So, what's your take on all of this? Do you think it was justified to strip back the layers? Or was it too harsh on someone simply navigating the stormy waters of politics? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what you think.